I'm Roger Misso, and this is How to Lose an Election. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of How to Lose an Election. I'm Roger Misso, and I want to say thanks so much to all of you who are listening to this show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app, watching us on YouTube, especially those of you who have become a patron of the show on our Patreon page. If you haven't done these things yet, it's not too late. It makes a huge difference. Financially supporting the show allows me to continue to bring on great guests, to make this a really quality production and something that will last for a long time to help inform candidates and the voting public about what it's really like to run for office. This week, you'll notice on purpose, we don't have a guest. I want to do this every so often, a brief interlude episode to talk about specific lessons that I learned on the campaign trail and to reflect on our previous tranche of guests. We were very fortunate to have 4 outstanding guests to kick the season off. And if you noticed, they had one thing that was in common between the 4 of them. They were all candidates in 2020 for the U.S. House of Representatives. But they were all very different candidates. We started with Qasim Rashid, who was a first-generation Muslim immigrant to the United States. He ran for Virginia State Office and then for the House District in Virginia's 1st Congressional District. We had Tedra Cobb, a businesswoman and a former elected official in the North Country of upstate New York, who ran for Congress in New York 21 in 2018 and 2020. We had J.D. Schulten, a professional baseball player turned paralegal turned prairie populist, popular candidate for Congress in a tough district running against a neo-Nazi sympathizer in Iowa's 4th Congressional District. And then we had Kim Olson, one of the first woman pilots in the history of the United States Air Force, ran for Texas State Agricultural Commissioner and then for Texas's 24th Congressional District in 2020. They had incredible lessons to share. And one of the things I want to do this episode is just to distill some of their wisdom, some of the things that I think really encapsulated the best of the first 4 episodes.
Now, losing absolutely stung. And I think anyone who says it was no big deal is probably being a little bit dishonest. But I think what I want to emphasize, though, is there's a difference between disappointment and regret. Disappointment is because you care and because you really gave it your all. And anything you give your all in, you're certainly going to be disappointed if you don't get your goal that first time, whether it's trying to get an A on a test or trying to make a sports team or trying to land a job. In this case, a very lengthy interview process of running for office. But regret is a little bit different. Regret is when you know that you didn't give it your all, or that you were dishonest with yourself or with somebody else, or if you try to win by violating your own principles or your own rules. And so from that standpoint, we have no regrets because we ran the right race. We did it the right way. We didn't compromise our dignity. I didn't say or do anything that I'm going to be embarrassed about, when my kids are old enough to understand what's going on, right? And I take a lot of comfort in that because at the end of the day, as disappointing as it was to lose, and as hurtful as it was to lose, I can hold my head up high knowing that I had the integrity to run an honest and clean race We were unassailable. That's one of the words I use with my campaign team, and we're going to be unassailable in everything we do.
Losing, and I've talked to a lot of candidates about losing. I think there's a grieving process. And so every one of us sort of deals with grief in a different way. I'm one of those people who deals with grief physically. So I have done a lot of walking. Now that it's very cold and snowy, I'm snowshoeing. You and I have talked about, I got a heavy bag for Christmas, so I did a heavy bag. My husband got me the bag. My kids got me the wraps and the gloves. And so for me, always sort of processing is and helping me to work my way through things is often through physical activity. But then there's also, I think for me, sometimes I have to stop myself from reading the news all the time, from being obsessed about the news. I have become very well acquainted with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes.
That was something I would say along the trail, I would meditate along with, and I still do that. There are things along the trail that I could not change. I could not change COVID. I could not change that my opponent lied. The commercials were lies. She had a lot of money to do that. I could not control that. And I think sometimes what happens when people lose is they go back and they think, should I have done something differently? I will tell you, I feel confident we ran a tough race. We talked about the Russian bounties on the lives of American soldiers. We talked about the environment. We talked about healthcare. And we ran commercials that really, I think, held Elise Stefanik accountable and were really tough and were honest. And yet we lost. And that's something that I have to process. But still, the question fundamentally is, did we do everything we could? We made millions of phone calls, millions of texts. We mobilized thousands of volunteers, and we raised, between the two cycles, over $7 million. That's a lot of work. And so I feel we as a team and as a community and everyone who participated in this race should feel proud of that.
Well, I'll say baseball, playing minor league baseball was the best thing that could ever happen for me to train for this. I mean, it is such a grind day in, day out. There's 10-hour bus rides where you can't lift your arm above your shoulder and you still got to pitch that night. And that's what I feel both campaigns were so much about was just the grind. When in 2018, I put my life on hold. I didn't have much in savings. I don't come from wealth or anything like that, but I was so driven to do this. I just had to do it. And fortunately, I was able to have enough money just to squeak by. And fortunately, here in Iowa, it doesn't cost much to get by. And so then between cycles, wanting to run again, but again, I'm a working class person. And so I had to find a job. And luckily, because of the national attention and everything, and luckily because of the caucus coming up, I was able to find a group that was really trying to raise awareness, an anti-poverty group that was able to hire me. And I mean, I didn't get rich from it. You don't get rich off of nonprofits, but I was able to get by enough to make it to today. And so now I'm trying to figure out what's next. And like immediately after the election, it is one of the hardest times because like you're just so drained from giving it everything you had, but then you have your staff is leaving, so you have to make sure you get all the things from them before they take off. Even though we were mostly remote this time, it's still making sure that where are all our lists, where are everything you worked on for the last year and a half, where can I find those? Where'd you save them? Type of stuff. In 2018, we had an office, and breaking down the office, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
After everything, and then people leaving too. So then it's like, I have all this. I have pretty much a whole office in my house because because of COVID, we didn't have an office as we were mostly virtual. So I have all our extra posters and stuff, and I'm still trying to sort through all that crap. But then mentally, it was just it's for me, it's really hard to really comprehend, like I've at certain times during the campaign, I also felt this, where I just suffered in probably some form of exhaustion. And then like this time after the election, like I was just spent, because it was like 4 years. Here I am, like we didn't improve on what we did in 2018. We went drastically the wrong way, and just like, what do you do? What's next? And I think about like, okay, what can I do for a job? What do I need to do? And just like, I know that I need to take time for myself before I jump into something else. But it was also like, well, what can I do to like, I need a vacation, but I don't really have money coming in. So what do I do?
Well, I call it armoring up. Again, I hearken back to my trailblazing days, and I had lots of opportunities to armor up. And what I told myself when I was young and breaking all those barriers, they're not really mad at you, Kim. They're mad or they're resentful for what you represent, a change in the military, the fact that a girl can do the same thing Steve Canyon boys out there all can do, all that kind of stuff. So if you always make it about not you personally, but what you represent, it buys you a little bit of distance between the personal and what you're going after. So I always kind of, most people's personal space is 3 feet, because that's the length of your hand, right? Or your arm stretched out. And so if you'll put your campaign at the end of your outstretched hand and say, this is it, make it a third entity, because it's a campaign. It's not a person. You're the great analogy of, you ain't the quarterback, cowboy. You're the football. They're trying to move you down the field. And again, let me use my football analogy. You are representing something. You're a part of a team that's trying to get values and a voice and stand for things. So you're about bringing those things out. And when they reject you on the phone, they're just rejecting the messenger of the value system that you've put out in front of you.
We are so fortunate to have some incredible guests. And today I just wanted to take a brief moment to talk to you about one specific aspect of running for office. This week marks almost exactly 1 year since I made the decision to end my own campaign for Congress in 2020. I, like many people around the country, made the decision to end the campaign before my name appeared on the primary election ballot. And the lesson I want to talk about today is how to end your campaign. This is focused primarily on the folks who don't have their name on the ballot. I want to caveat and begin by saying that if your name is on the ballot, especially on a general election ballot, you should probably just take the campaign all the way to election day. It doesn't mean that if things are looking hopeless or some crisis comes up in your life that you might not just stop actively campaigning and sort of coast into election day. But if you are the party's nominee, there are people that are out there counting on you, regardless of what it feels like, for you to appear on the ballot and to put in a good show. So if that's you, I encourage you to do that. This is mostly for folks who are in a multi-way primary election or a multi-primary or multi-candidate special election. These are where it gets a little bit more nebulous. And you heard Kim and I talk about what it feels like to run in a primary election. And a lot of our candidate training programs that exist out there are really good at teaching you how to run if you're a Democrat against a Republican. But they're not really great about talking about how to run in a competitive primary field. That's something we'll get to in another episode. But today, I want to talk about how to decide to end your campaign and the psychological reasons why that's so difficult. Let's start off with the psychological reason, the biggest one, and it is the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is when you continue doing something because you've already invested a lot of resources in it. That could be time, it could be money, it could be effort. On political campaigns, it is all three of those things. This is because of loss aversion, right? We as human beings are psychologically wired to do more to avoid a loss than to win a gain of the same order of magnitude. And there's some behavioral brain science research on that. We won't get into it. But the sunk cost fallacy is the reason why too many good people continue campaigns that they probably should get out of. As you get into campaigning, you're somebody who believes strongly that you are the right person for the job. Of course you are, or else why else would you have gotten into this crazy pursuit, right? You believe you're the best person for the job. You throw your hat in the ring. And then circumstances, whether it's fundraising, whether it's a lack of public support, whether it's a crisis that pops up in your own life, any number of things might dictate that you aren't the front runner. And depending on how big the field is, how small your base of support is, that can really change things in the race for you. So you might consider getting out of the race. I have seen many candidates who think very highly of themselves, and rightfully so, but don't have a real good handle on their level of support compared to their other candidates, who go all the way through to a primary when they probably should have bowed out early. And I don't want to make assumptions for other people, right? You have to decide at the end of the day what's right for your race and what's right for you as a human being. But when you're running for office, before you run for office, it's a good idea to set out a set of conditions that might trigger you to think about your position or your continuing in the race. Before we made the decision to run, we established about three. The first was fundraising. Are we raising enough money to continue in the race? Because we weren't wealthy enough to fund any of the campaign on our own. We needed to make sure that the money raised through the campaign could pay for the entirety of the campaign. So that was number one. Number two was, are we getting enough community support, right? Is the campaign viable from a pure ballot box perspective? Are enough people, do we think, going to vote for us at the end of the day? And are we trending in the right direction? And the third one really was, are we doing good? Are we running a positive, constructive campaign? Because if we felt ourselves getting sucked down into the negative and into the mud, really that wasn't the kind of campaign we wanted ourselves to run. So we made a deal to check in with ourselves monthly, or at the very least quarterly. It gave us the understanding between the two of us that this was something that we could stop, right? We weren't on a roller coaster forever. This is something where you can get off the ride if it gets a little too out of control. And, we started the race and we raised a good amount of money. We kept raising a decent amount of money, but in New York 24 and 2020, it was a competitive three-way Democratic primary from the outset. And you had two very well-established candidates in opposition to our campaign who raised more money. Two people who were, either well-known because, one opponent had run before, and another candidate who, had better and stronger family ties in the Democratic Party. And I just wasn't well-established enough yet. And really, for me, from a purely just, this is anecdotal, my campaign perspective, the thing that really tripped us up, and the reason that we got out about this time last year, was that on the campaign side, we made the decision, the way New York 24 works, there's 4 counties, each with their own Democratic Party committee. They meet in February before the June primary to decide which Democratic candidate they're going to designate for each race. Each county party does this. Wayne County, my home county, met early and decided they were not going to designate any candidate. So there were 3 strong candidates, and they wanted it to go to a primary election and let the voters decide who the candidate should be. The other 3 counties, we, as the campaign went on, reasoned that it would be really strong from a credibility standpoint for the future of the campaign for us to win at least one county party's designation. It's going to be a tall task. We went all in on one county, and we, drove everywhere, knocked on county party members' doors, committee members' doors, had pizza parties and events and listening sessions, and we grinded away, and lo and behold, on designation vote night, we lost the vote by just 1 or 2 votes, which was heartbreaking, truly, and I think started the descending crest of the campaign. The largest county met, and we tried to salvage what we could, but obviously didn't get that designation either. So we made a choice, right? And the choice was to try to get that victory for credibility's sake instead of fundraising. And we were kind of punished for that decision. At the end of February rolled around. I had this big press event out in front of my former high school after getting a lot of pressure from national and local Democrats to get out of the race, saying I'm not getting out of the race. And then of course what happened immediately after that, my entire family came down with the flu. It was the flu at the time. We tested positive for the flu. It wasn't early COVID-19, thankfully. But we were out for another week, 2 weeks, recovering from a really nasty strain of the flu. And God bless her. And this is another lesson for candidates out there. Make sure you get a campaign manager who is going to be completely honest with you and who understands your considerations for continuing in the campaign. I had a campaign manager who came to our house and said, through what I can only imagine was an incredibly difficult and awkward conversation for her, laid it all out for us and said, I think we might want to reconsider continuing in this race. And, she was right. And the decision that we were forced with about a year ago was, do we continue on, just continue to burn things to the ground, continue to burn through money, continue to just run a fundraising focused campaign at a time when we really wanted to focus on field and voters and voter contact, burn through what goodwill we had left in the community and in the Democratic Party? Or could, through the act of stepping aside and turning it from a 3-person to a 2-person Democratic primary, could we salvage some of that goodwill, take what we had built, and continue to do good things for Democrats? There were competitive races locally and nationally, continue to do good things. And, I had never intended my presence in the race to be a divisive thing, and it was difficult. Because you feel like I'm the best person for this job, but you have to consider that sometimes, regardless of how you think of yourself, might not be a realistic thing to believe that you're going to win. And for me and for the campaign and the family at the time, I think it was absolutely the right decision. Obviously, would love to be a sitting member of Congress right now, or would have loved to win the primary. But it's important to have those wickets to consider, and to make sure that you have people in your life. Some of them you will hire to run your campaign or to be a part of your campaign, who will continually assess where you're at and who will be honest with you. Because the sunk cost fallacy in campaigns is very real, and it can put you in financial distress, relationship distress. It can put you in a bad place locally if you run a campaign that makes you seem like you're in it for yourself or for the wrong reasons. So it's vitally important as candidates to be honest with yourself. Don't be afraid, even after you've gotten into the race, to take a step back and reassess. And don't be afraid to end the campaign if it makes sense for you to get out of the race. I'm not telling you to second guess yourself. I'm not telling you to doubt yourself and to have that doubt just leap out of the race at the first sign of doubt, because there's going to be tough times, right? The important thing is to set those wickets out, set those expectations. Give yourself a time frame to reassess the race. Could be monthly, could be bi-weekly, could be quarterly, right? Whatever makes sense. And then have dedicated people in your life who are outside of your family be the ones to engage in that assessment with you, right? To give you the honest truth. You always want people in your corner, and you're running, and I was like this too. You want people who are going to tell you that you're great, right? Because it feels good. But you really also want at least a few people who are going to be brutally honest with you and tell you exactly how you're doing. Some of them you're going to pay. Some of them are just going to be close advisors. But at least one of them should be the one to actually put the numbers and analysis behind those wickets you developed and say, if it warrants it, hey, I think we might think about ending this train a little early. It hurts, right? It sucks. But it's a reality of campaigns. And a reality we talked about so far this season, that 80% of people who run every year are going to lose their election. It's just a fact. So if you set yourself up for success by being as informed about the process as possible before you start, and to be able to set out those expectations before you run, you're going to be in a much better mental space and feel a little bit more in control of a really uncontrollable process if you do that. So if you have any questions about how to set this up, leave a comment on our YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts. You can reach out to me. You can find me on social media. You can @ the show on social media. One of the reasons that I started this project was because I've been through a lot of the candidate training programs that do outstanding things and prepare you to run for office. But the one thing that they don't do, and that we don't do in politics really well at all, is to talk about what happens after you lose, and to be there as a community and a place to go after you lose so you don't feel alone. Losing is an isolating experience. Running for office is very personally vulnerable pursuit, and then losing in that personally vulnerable pursuit can feel very isolating and burns and stings a little bit. So how do we come together to take care of candidates like that? And I think it's hopefully through projects like this and through being open and talking about what it feels like to lose a campaign, what it feels like to end a campaign a little early, right? Those can be important things. So if you find value in this, I hope you continue listening. We're going to have some great guests here over the next couple of weeks before we do another brief interlude campaign lesson here. So continue to like the show, subscribe to the show, rate us 5 stars, become a patron. If you like what you hear, suggest topics, suggest guests. Help us get in touch with guests and get them on the show. If you want to be a guest, reach out. If you have a lesson that you want to share, reach out and we'll get you on the show. But I thank you for being a part of this journey and for helping How to Lose an Election become a success. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.